Grief does not kill most people loudly. It kills them quietly. I have watched it happen 4 times, and almost happened to me once. Let me tell you what grief actually does to a person. Grief has a smell, and nobody warned me about that part. Here is what I mean. Bernard's side of the closet still smelled like him for almost 2 years after he was gone. Old Spice and the faint trace of motor oil that never fully washed out of his hands, no matter how hard he scrubbed them. Every single morning, I opened that closet to get my house coat, and for just a second, just one small, merciful second, my nose said he was still there. And then my brain would catch up, and I would stand there in the dark, holding my house coat, breathing him in, because it was the only piece of him I had left that morning. Before I continue, my name is Harriet Louise Gaines. I am 82 years old and have lived in Birmingham, Alabama my entire life. I buried my husband Bernard after 39 years of marriage. I buried my son Terrence at 41 years old. I have sat in the front row at 7 funerals for women who knew me when my hair was black and my knees worked right. Women who understood my life in the quiet way only people who walk beside you for decades ever understand it. And I am here to tell you that grief is the most misunderstood experience in this entire human life. Not because it is some complicated mystery, but because the people who speak about it loudly have never been deep enough inside it to tell you the truth. And the ones who have been that deep inside it are usually too worn out from surviving it to explain what they actually found there. I am not too worn out, not today. So let me tell you what I know. Before you think I am about to hand you 5 neat steps or tell you to stay busy and count your blessings, stop right there. I spent the first 2 years after Bernard died following all of that advice faithfully, and every piece of it did one thing for me. It delayed my healing by about 4 years. I am telling you this so that what happened to me does not happen to you. What I have learned from carrying grief across more than 4 decades is something nobody said to me at any funeral, any church service, any well-meaning kitchen table conversation. What I learned is this: grief is not something you get over. It is something you learn to hold. And how you hold it makes all the difference in the world between a life that keeps going and a life that quietly stops. You are probably watching this because you have lost someone, or you are watching someone you love disappear into grief, and you do not know how to reach them. Either way, I want you to know that nothing I am about to say requires you to be strong. Not one word of it. Let me tell you about a woman named Josephine Ruth Patton. Josephine and I met at 16th Street Baptist Church here in Birmingham back in 1969. She was tall and elegant in a way that made her seem like she had been somewhere important. though she had grown up 2 streets over from me, and we went to the same schools. She had a garden that was the envy of the whole neighborhood every spring, and she could make a sweet potato pie from memory that people requested by name at every church dinner for 30 years. She married a man named Howard Patton in 1965. Howard worked as a machinist at the steel mill for 28 years. Quiet and steady. The kind of man who fixed things in the house before you finished asking him to. They had 2 daughters, a son, and a brick house on Center Street they had lived in since before their children were born. Howard died in November of 2000 from a heart attack. He was 62 years old and had never been sick a day that any of us knew of. He went to bed on a Thursday night saying he felt a little off, and he did not wake up on Friday morning. Josephine found him. After the funeral, the church surrounded Josephine the way church communities do. Food for weeks. Her daughters flew in. Her pastor came by twice a week. Everybody told Josephine the same things people always say. That Howard was at peace. That time heals. That she needed to stay busy and be strong for her grandchildren. Josephine tried to do all of it. She held herself together at the funeral. She went back to church 4 Sundays after the burial, sat in her same pew, and said she was leaning on the Lord when people asked. But here is what Josephine told me about 6 months after Howard died, sitting on her back porch while her garden was coming back to life around us. She said, "Harriet, I feel like I am living inside a house where somebody turned off all the heat. Everything looks exactly the same. The furniture is where it always was. My coffee cup is in the same cabinet, but the warmth is gone, and I cannot find the thermostat." I have thought about that sentence for more than 20 years, because it is the truest description of losing a long marriage I have ever heard. The house looks the same from outside, but some central warmth you did not even know you were depending on until it was gone. That is gone. And people keep telling you to redecorate, turn on more lights, get out more. Not one of them understands that the problem was never the lighting. The problem is the heat. Josephine tried to do what everyone told her. Her daughters called every Sunday. Her son visited twice a month. They were good children doing everything right. But what they could not give her was the texture of ordinary daily life with someone who had shared every room of it for 35 years. Howard had been the one who made noise in the kitchen at 5 every morning. Josephine had fussed at him about that noise for decades. After he died, the silence at 5 in the morning was a weight she could not lift. By late 2002, Josephine had stopped planting her spring garden. The bed sat empty. Her daughter noticed, but did not understand what it meant. I understood. The person who tends a garden believes in the future enough to plant things. Josephine had stopped believing in the future, not from despair, but from exhaustion. She had used every bit of herself, performing the recovery people expected, and had nothing left for the real work of healing. Josephine Ruth Patton died in the winter of 2005. She was 65 years old. The death certificate said congestive heart failure. I believe that is medically true. I also believe the truth is more complicated than any certificate. She ran out of reasons, not with drama or intention. She just quietly used up what she had, because nobody ever told her the truth about what grief actually required of her. I have watched this same quiet fading happen with 3 other people I loved. Different years, different losses, same ending. Every single time, the person was surrounded by people who cared about them and had absolutely no idea what to say or do that would actually matter. You may be thinking right now that this is very sad, but what does it have to do with you? Maybe you have not lost anyone yet. Maybe your grief was years ago and you think you are past it. But here is what I know after 82 years. Grief is coming for all of us. That is not pessimism. That is the truth about loving people in a world where people die. The beliefs you walk into it carrying will determine whether you come through it standing. The people I watched lose themselves to grief were not weaker than the ones who survived. They were just without the right information. When you are lost in a wilderness, a map is survival equipment. So let me give you some of the map. 2 things I wish someone had told me before I ever lost anyone. First, grief does not run on a schedule. You will have a terrible week, and then a surprisingly normal Tuesday, and then grief ambushes you 3 months later in the bread aisle at the grocery store because they used to like that particular brand of crackers. This is not you going backwards. It means you loved someone real. Second, say their name. Say it out loud, often, to anyone who will listen. I have had well-meaning people suggest gently that it might be healthier for me to talk about Bernard less, to live more in the present. What they did not understand is that talking about Bernard is how he stays alive in this house. My grandchildren know who Bernard Gaines was because I kept telling them. They know he could not parallel park to save his life after 39 years of trying. They know he cried at every graduation he ever attended, including ones for children he did not know. He is alive to them because I kept him alive. That is not grief that failed to heal. That is love that found somewhere new to go. I have to tell you about my son Terrence now, because I would be dishonest if I talked about grief without telling you about the kind that breaks a different part of you than losing a husband does. Terrence Bernard Gaines was born March 14, 1971, at University of Alabama Hospital, here in Birmingham. He was my first child and the loudest person I have ever known, which, if you knew Bernard, makes perfect sense. He taught history and coached football at Woodlawn High School for 16 years. His students loved him with the specific devotion young people give to teachers who actually see them. He had a daughter named Brianna, who was 12 years old when he died. Terrence died on August 9th, 2012, an aneurysm. He had complained of headaches for a week, said it was probably just football preseason stress. I told him to go to the doctor. He said he would when the season settled down. On a Thursday morning, his wife Carolyn called me before 6 in the morning, and I knew from the first sound she made before she said a single word. What nobody tells you about losing a child. It does not matter how old they are. When your child dies before you do, something breaks in a way that nothing in this world fully repairs. I had already buried Bernard 2 years earlier. I thought I knew the worst grief had to offer. I had not even close. Losing Bernard had a natural order to it. We were both old. We had both known someday was coming. Losing Terrence had no natural order at all. It felt like a mistake the universe should be required to correct. The grief that came with that feeling was not just sorrow. It was a rage with nowhere reasonable to go, and a guilt with no logical basis that sat across from me at the breakfast table every single morning, asking what I had missed. People said things after Terrence died that they meant as kindness. Someone told me God needed Terrence more than I did. Someone said at least he did not suffer long. I believe in the Lord with everything I have. I also needed my son here, coaching those boys on Friday nights and putting his arm around me at Christmas. Saying he was in a better place did not make this place better. Not that day. What I needed someone to say to me, and what I am saying to you now, is this. There is no correct response to losing a child. No timeline. No stage it is supposed to stop at. You are allowed to say it is still hard a decade later. You are allowed to not be fine and to say so for as long as it is true. I want to tell you about one more person before I finish. Her name is Rosetta Jean Holloway, and she is part of why I am sitting in front of this camera today. Rosetta is 78 years old and lives in Tuscaloosa now, but she grew up here in Birmingham, and we have been close friends for over 50 years. Her husband James died in 2018. Her sister, who had been her closest companion her whole life, passed in 2021. By 2022, when I called Rosetta on Sunday evenings, those calls had shrunk from an hour to about 10 minutes. She was fine. She was managing. And she had, I could hear it clearly even through a phone, largely stopped being present in her own days. I drove down to Tuscaloosa in September of 2022. Did not call ahead, just drove. Rosetta opened the door, looked at me on her porch, and her eyes filled up before either of us said a word. She said, "Harriet, nobody comes anymore. Nobody comes anymore." I stayed 3 days. We talked about James. We looked at old photographs until we were both laughing and crying at the same time, which is its own kind of medicine. And on the morning I was leaving, Rosetta poured us coffee and sat across from me and said, "I think I forgot somewhere along the way that I was still supposed to be a person." That is what happens when grief goes unwitnessed for too long. You forget you are still supposed to be a person. Rosetta is doing better now. She calls me first sometimes. She went back to her church's senior fellowship on Tuesday mornings. She is not fine, but she is present. She is still a person. That is all any of us can ask for. I am 82 years old, and I do not know how many more mornings I will wake up in this house. What I know is that I have spent a great deal of this life on the far side of loss, and I want to use what time I have to say the things I needed someone to say to me when I was younger, and still thought I had to carry all of it alone. You are not doing grief wrong. However long it is taking, however it arrives, in floods or quiet waves or a sudden ambush on an ordinary Tuesday, you are not doing it wrong. You are not broken because you still miss them. Missing them is love. It is proof that what you had was real. Do not let yourself disappear into it. Fight that pull. Get up and go somewhere even when you do not feel like it. Pick up the phone even when talking feels like more than you have. The people who survive great loss are not the ones who felt it less. They are the ones who stayed connected to the living while carrying the dead. And if someone you love has gone quiet, if the calls are getting shorter, if they seem smaller than they used to be, please go to them. Not with advice. Go with your presence. Sit in their house. Say the name of the person they lost out loud. Let them know that person is not forgotten. That is the thing almost nobody does. And it is the thing that saves people. Call someone today who is grieving and say the name of who they lost. Just say it. Prove to them that the person still exists in the world, in your memory, in your voice, out loud in the air between you. Because the loneliest part of grief is not the missing. It is the fear that you are the only one left who remembers, that their name is about to disappear from the mouths of the living. They should not carry that fear alone, and neither should you. I have said everything I came here to say. My granddaughter helped me get this recorded, and she tells me I need to say subscribe, so you do not miss the next one. And I am passing that along because she worked hard on this, and she has earned it. But what I really want from you is this. Leave a comment below with the name of someone you have lost. Just their name is enough. First name only if that is all you can manage. I will read every single comment, and when I read yours, I will say that name out loud in this room. Because everybody who was ever loved deserves to still be spoken. Bernard is still with me. Terrence is still with me. Josephine and all the others are still with me. Yours is still with you too. You are not carrying them alone. God bless you. Be well.